At my daughter's graduation dinner, my parents announced they stole her future. So my husband broke my brother's nose. The steakhouse was supposed to be a place for celebration. Candlelight flickered across our table, and my daughter, Aria, was radiant with pride. She'd just graduated high school, valedictorian, captain of her volleyball team, and already accepted into her dream university. This dinner was meant to be our moment to breathe, to finally toast to all her sacrifices paying off. But my parents, George and Diane, had other plans. They weren't just there to eat steak. They were there to set a match to everything. It started the moment the waiter set down our drinks. My mother raised her wine glass, clinked her fork against it, and smiled that tight-lipped smile she always wore when she was about to ruin someone's life. "We have an announcement," Diane said sweetly. "We've decided that Aria's college fund will go to Mason instead." My hand froze around my fork. Aria's college fund. The one we'd spent 18 years building. The one we'd protected like it was made of fragile glass. And they wanted to hand it over to Mason, my nephew, my brother Eric's screw-up son. Mason, who dropped out of school twice. Mason, who stole from us at Christmas and blamed the delivery guy. Mason, who crashed Eric's car and got a brand new one a week later, courtesy of George and Diane's undying favoritism. There was silence so thick I could barely breathe. "What?" Aria's voice was soft, disbelieving. George folded his hands, looking every bit the stern patriarch. "It's the right thing to do. Mason's struggling. This will help him get back on track." I felt Nate's hand on my knee under the table. Steady, grounding. My husband didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back, took a slow sip of beer, and laughed. "Funny," he said, "because we moved that fund last month." The smile slid right off Diane's face. "You what?" "We moved it," Nate said, grinning. "We knew you'd pull something like this, so we made sure you can't touch a cent." Her face went red so fast I thought she'd rupture something. "You had no right!" she shrieked, slamming her glass down so hard it splashed wine across the tablecloth. George's fist hit the table right after. "That money belongs to the family." "Aria is family," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "And her future is not a communal piggy bank." Diane pointed at me like a prosecutor at trial. "Mason needs it more. Eric's had such a hard time, raising him alone, trying to keep him out of trouble. You're selfish." That was it. The crack that shattered the dam inside me. "Selfish?" I hissed. "You mean the way you bailed Mason out when he stole from our house? Or the time you paid off his DUI? Or when you bought him a second car after he totaled the first one high off his ass?" George's jaw clenched. "That's different." "Different my ass." Nate pushed his chair back. "We worked for that money. You contributed nothing." "You ungrateful little..." Diane started. Aria stood, her chair scraping the floor. "I don't need anything from you," she said, voice shaking but clear. "Not your money, not your fake support. Nothing." Nate stood beside her, hand on her shoulder. "Let's go." But it didn't end there. 2 days later, the bank called. Diane and George had tried to impersonate us to withdraw the fund themselves. When that failed, they lawyered up, claiming they'd co-funded the account and deserved a cut. Their proof? A single $2,000 check they'd deposited when Aria was a baby. A gift they'd conveniently rewritten into investment. We crushed them in court, but they weren't done. They called the IRS and reported us for tax fraud. Aria's financial aid got frozen. Her scholarship was held up. They weren't just trying to steal her future. They were trying to destroy it. That's when Nate and I flipped the script. We dug into their finances. Years ago, Nate had helped them set up a rental property, And guess what? They'd been underreporting income for over a decade. Fraud on a silver platter. I called Diane directly. I found something interesting, I said. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. Try me. The IRS audit on us evaporated. Aria's money was released. But then came the final escalation. Mason. It was 2 a.m. when we woke to the sound of breaking glass. Nate grabbed the bat. I grabbed my phone. We crept downstairs, but Aria was already there. Mason, she said, stunned. There he stood, crowbar in hand, pupils blown wide, half drunk, half desperate. Where's the money? He slurred. They promised me the money. Nate stepped between them, voice low and lethal. Put it down! Mason staggered closer, raising the crowbar. You stole from me. Aria's voice cut through the dark. It was never yours. Mason's lip curled. What are you gonna do about it? Nate punched him so hard his head snapped back. Mason hit the floor, blood streaming from his nose. The crowbar clanged onto the tile. The cops came. Diane and George bailed Mason out before sunrise. And Diane called me, voice trembling with rage. You had him arrested? She spat. He's family. So is Aria, I said. You just forgot. That Sunday, Eric called a family meeting. A peace summit, he called it. Nate didn't want to go. Aria flat out refused. I'm done with them, she said, and I didn't blame her. But I wanted one last chance to burn the whole illusion to ash. We arrived at Diane and George's house to find Eric already there, Mason beside him, bruised and sullen. Diane and George sat stiffly, arms crossed, like courtroom defendants. Eric tried his soft, reasonable voice. We've all made mistakes. Yeah, Nate said. Yours started at birth. Eric ignored him. This isn't what Mom and Dad wanted. I laughed. They wanted to steal from my daughter. They sent Mason to break into my house. I didn't mean, Mason began. Shut up, I snapped. You knew exactly what you were doing. Mason's lip quivered. They told me it was mine. They said it had always been mine. I froze. They... what? Diane's face turned to stone. We had to, she said. He needed hope. You lied to him, I said. You built his future out of my daughter's bones. George stood, finger jabbing the air. You've always had more. Mason's had nothing. Because you enabled him into nothing, I shouted. You raised him to believe he was owed everything. And you told him you'd steal from Aria to pay for it. Mason's shoulders shook. You lied to me, he whispered. All of you. He walked out. And for once, no one followed. Diane called me ungrateful. George said I was destroying the family. I told them the truth. There's nothing left to destroy. Aria went to her dream school, paid for in full. Diane and George? They lost everything that mattered. Us. Sometimes the only way to survive family is to bury them alive.